mystical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL Network.
Yes, that is right. Welcome, everybody, on into the Saturday Night Network for another edition of SNL Stories. And this is going to be a really exciting one I've wanted to do for a long time. And I can't wait to tell you all about our guest that we have here today. But first, let me introduce our co-interviewers on the podcast. And first up is my man, James Stevens. James, how you doing, buddy?
John, I'm excited. You know, the Waldens eat their young will not be seen tonight, so that SNN can present this following special program.
Yes, 100%, taking it all the way back to season 3, which we will get to in just a moment. But also got to introduce my man, Bill Kenney. Bill, how you doing?
John, so happy to be here. So happy to be able to talk to Connie. She has lived the dream that all us SNL superfans have wanted in our lives. So can't wait to get into it.
Absolutely. Well, let me tell you about our guest a little bit. So if you've, no matter, what age you are, what generation you fell in love with the show, I'm sure you've had the thought, I would love to host Saturday Night Live one day. And, back in season 3 of the show, 1977, there was an opportunity for just anybody to host the show. And they had a contest called the Anyone Can Host Contest. If you go back and you watch the season 3 DVDs or on Peacock, you'll see all about this, that throughout the fall of 1977, there was promotions on the show about sending in a postcard to apply to host the Christmas show that year. So we had all types of regular people trying to be on the show, and they ended up picking 5 finalists, brought them on the show to, announce their candidacy, and then voted one in to host the Christmas show. And I'm so excited to have one of our finalists from the Anyone Can Host competition back here with us today to tell us all about her experience. Ladies and gentlemen, Connie Crawford is here. Connie, how are you doing?
Good. I'm happy to be with super fans. I was a super fan myself back in the day.
Right. I remember that. Yeah, I remember just seeing online just to see when I was watching the show, they were talking about how much of a fan you were. So let me just start, back at the beginning, back, in the Madeline Kahn episode, October 7th, 1977, there is a segment that comes on where Lorne Michaels is talking directly to camera, and he announces that there's going to be this Anyone Can Host competition where you can send in a postcard. They're going to have 5 finalists flown to New York City, put up in the Swank Essex House Hotel. You're going to be paid $3,000 and potentially host the Christmas show on December 17th. And I would love to know, where were you when you saw this announcement? How did you find out about the contest? Tell us everything.
Well, like you all, I was a super fan. And so every Saturday night, now I was a first year in college, okay? But all the parties would stop, and people like me would gather around the big old console TVs that were in the main rooms in our dorms and watch Saturday Night Live. All parties would stop. And so, I watched once I discovered the show, I watched every episode faithfully. So of course I went out of my mind when I saw that. I mean, first of all, Madeline Kahn, can we just talk about what a brilliant comedian she was? And
absolutely.
Yeah. And to be able to see back in the day, it's hard to express how great it was to be able to see comedians like her do goofy stuff live. Yeah. I mean, it was live, which TV wasn't. And so, to be able to see that and to see somebody like Madeline Kahn, and of course the troupe and whoever the musicians were, was always exciting. But then, of course, I was like, oh my God, I have to apply for this, and what do you do? And so I was at Vassar, and as I said, it was my first semester. And, everybody was just abuzz about this thing. And for a long time, I just didn't know what to do. I was just, and so it took a while to figure out what kind of postcard to send.
Yeah, I am so glad, Connie, that you mentioned, because sometimes we just need to be reminded that there was a time where if you missed it, you missed it. There was no Peacock or YouTube and all this kind of stuff, where parties stopped, and it's just incredible to think about how a show like that, again, because there wasn't a lot of live TV. So eventually, you do send in your postcard. You do apply. Can you how did it become known to you that you were a finalist? Can you talk us through that part?
Yeah, so I dug through some old paperwork. So back in the day, I'm going to say that phrase a lot because it was 1977. So we didn't have phones in our rooms. We didn't have cell phones. And so what would happen is people would call the college, then the college would connect them with your dorm, and then a little person at the front desk would write little notes. And I don't know if you can. So this is not the note, but this is a note a friend of mine sent, and they would leave these notes in your little cubby. This is a note from a friend of mine about the excitement about the show, and she was studying Latin, so everything had a Latin reference. But so that's my dorm room number. So the secretary or the front door person would write little notes like this. So one day I go down and I got a little note saying, call Barbara Burns at Saturday Night Live. And then, of course, you have to go into a phone booth and put in lots of coin and call her. And at that point, they wanted to talk to me. They wanted to just, I think, see if I was sane. And because, so I think there was just as I recall, there was a conversation first. But all the messages were these little notes in a little cubby. And, every day you would check. And
well, that's incredible to think again, people who just are so reliant on cell phones and all these different devices. But yeah, you would have a receptionist or whatever in the dorms. But no, it makes sense that Barbara would be calling into kind of pre-screen to make sure, because as we know, and we're going to get to it, there's a lot of on-camera stuff with the 5 finalists that, the mic is on you, the spotlight's on you. So they want to make sure you're not going to, be a crazy person, I guess, right?
Yeah, so that's very interesting. And the postcard thing always, I was trying to explain this to my 13-year-old daughter. and as someone who's watched SNL for 35 years, I can remember sending my postcard in to try to get into the show and never getting picked. SNL, call me. But so I remember reading that your entry was only 2 words. Is that correct?
yes.
And that you wouldn't reveal it. Now, are you able to reveal what those 2 words are now?
Oh,
or
yeah. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe I wouldn't reveal it to James. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't remember.
No, of course, I'm happy to reveal it. So I have to tell you the backstory, though, if that's okay.
Of course.
So I'm, futzing around trying to think of clever things to say on my postcard. So the prompt was send in a postcard and then say in, I think, 25 words or less why you want to host. So again, it's 1977. I'm at college, and so a friend of mine and I drop acid, and we're, Vassar College is one of the most beautiful campuses, and we're in the shrubbery, tripping, and I pulled out my college ID card from my back pocket, and I looked at it, and my face was kind of unhappy, and right underneath it, it said in big black letters, expires in, a few months. And I thought, oh God, wouldn't it be awful? What if this person in the card was alive? And we can't do anything without our cards. We can't eat. We can't, go into certain buildings. And so my friend and I said, if our cards staged a revolution, then everything would shut down. And it's 1977. So, Nixon, it's like
on the heels of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And so so anyway, so we started running around the woods, pretending that our cards slip out of our pockets at night and come to this section of the woods and start staging a revolution. And so, of course, then I said, well, that's it. My card is going to sacrifice itself, and its friends are going to staple it to a Holiday Inn postcard because they've snuck to the local Holiday Inn, and just write "free me" underneath. And so the next day, of course, I haven't slept all night. I've got my hair in little tiny braids because I had to. And I go to the post office and I stapled my card, and I've got a Holiday Inn postcard. And I go up and my eyes are probably like spinning around. And I said to the postal person, is this mailable? And they looked at me like, yeah. So that's what I mailed in. I stapled my college ID card and just wrote "free me."
Oh my gosh.
I love that.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's what it takes, people. That's the kind of thing it takes.
Yeah. So just to remind some of the listeners of the timeline. So basically we had that Madeline Kahn episode, and then the next 3 episodes, 2 in October, 1 in November, were Hugh Hefner, Charles Grodin, and Ray Charles. And throughout those episodes, they would do reminders about, I think it was Garrett Morris, and then Bill Murray with Michael O'Donoghue, reminding people to send in their entries. And then they would announce, on the Ray Charles episode, that the next week we're going to have the 5 finalists who are going to come in out of 150,000 people who applied for this. We're going to have 5 people coming in next week. And we get to that November 19th, 1977 episode, season 3, episode 6, with host Buck Henry, where we get to meet our 5 finalists. So, Connie, when did you find out that you were going to be going there, and what was that experience like to, get to come to New York City to do all of this?
Well, we all went crazy because, again, it wasn't just me; it was my whole generation, and I shouldn't say my whole generation, but people my age were crazy about this show because it was so radical. It was political. It was funny. It was sharp. It was dark. Well, this was, a lot of those old writers from Harvard Lampoon were still there.
Michael O'Donoghue and friends, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Tom Schiller and these great writers. And anyway, so we were all excited. So we went crazy. So, I found some old, my friends, would send me little cards and things, just going crazy about, we couldn't believe it, that it was actually going to happen. And, but when, I don't know, I was looking for some dates. Well, so can I read this? This is from my friend Carol.
Sure, whatever you want to read. We'd love to hear it.
Okay. Yeah. It was probably, I think it happened probably a week before the episode, they told us, I think, because as I said, they had contacted us earlier, so we were kind of on warning. But I think it happened pretty fast once it happened. So again, she's studying Latin, and she says, Constantine, in honor of this momentous occasion, Augustus would like to hold a triumphal march in your honor. He wants to know how you'd feel about 150 people marching along the Via Appia dressed as pom-pom girls and cheering Connie for Saturday Night Live. So, my friends, it was exciting for everybody.
You were a local celebrity, yeah.
Oh, yeah. First, and also as a first year and first semester. So it was like, it was a great entry. So I'm not quite sure of the dates, but I would say probably they let us know a week before we had to be there.
And how did they let you know?
Again, the little cards,
Okay.
She just left a message. And then I think I called her and they made arrangements. But I was in Poughkeepsie, so I was close to New York, not like some of the others.
Amazing. So you go and you get to meet these other 4 finalists as well, Buck Henry, the cast, and the crew. Any memories of you walking into SNL and what that was like?
Oh, well, the first thing was, you did mention that the Marriott was swanky. It was back in the day. It was swanky. So that was fun. But what they did was they said, come to this hotel room because you're going to make a film with, what's his name?
Gary Weiss, right?
Oh, yeah. Like those Gary Weiss films are a good example of how edgy that show was.
Right.
You know, like there's one, you probably know it. There's a film he made with John Belushi that's black and white and very kind of dark or just sort of meditative. I don't know if you all know the one I'm talking about, but, you know, it's where John Belushi could just act. And I mean, he made these great independent films that were a little bit different than the sketches. Anyway, so they said there was a message saying, meet us in this hotel room and you're going to shoot a scene with Gary Weiss and Buck Henry. And so I walk into this hotel room and obviously I recognize Buck Henry and they introduce me to people. And then they say, sitting at the end of the room, they say, and this is the governor of South Dakota, who's one of the finalists. And it just so happens that I had spent 2 summers living on a horse ranch in South Dakota. And so I ran up to him and I was like, I spent the happiest months of my life in your state. And he goes, oh my God, give me a hug. And we hugged and we were best friends from that moment on. And Dick Knipe, I think his name was.
Yeah.
Yep. Richard.
Really nice guy.
Governor from South Dakota.
And really fun-loving, very nice guy. But anyway, I was more excited to see him than Buck Henry
So the first thing you do when you get there is check into the swanky hotel, and you guys, because I'm so glad you mentioned the film because we were going to get to the Gary Weiss film, which again, those listeners who have not checked out this episode, of course, we're talking about November 19th, 1977, with Buck Henry is the host and Leon Redbone is the musical guest, but they bring in the five finalists and they do this. Buck is interviewing you guys on this Gary Weiss film. So obviously somebody pitches to you, or is it your idea? You're going to take off his glasses and you're like putting the moves on him.
Yeah, so the prompt was each of you are going to bribe him somehow. And I think the grandmother, the woman who won, said something like, I'm going to die, or if I don't.
Yeah, she said she's going to die around New Year's Eve that year.
Yeah. And, you know, it's really one of the things that popped into my head when the Me Too movement happened was the fact that I knew exactly, you know, what they wanted. Because Gary Weiss just said, I think you know how you're going to bribe. And I said, yeah.
Oh, God.
There wasn't even a prompt. It was just like, oh, yeah, of course. You know, I'm the 18-year-old girl and I'm going to seduce him. So then they just shot it. They shot it right there and it was improvised. And I think they took the first take. You know, it was real simple. It was just sit down and take off. Yeah, it was, you know, and he's a pro, right? I mean, he's Buck Henry. So, you know, and I've watched him. And so it was kind of easy in a way. But very much a Me Too moment of like, oh, okay, we all know how this works. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can imagine how, especially with some of those things that recollection comes back. But I will say that it is done with, it is humorous because you're going through all 5 of you and you're all doing the different bribes. I think the mother from Peoria, I think she's saying she has no money for Christmas or something like that, you know. But
no, I mean, I don't regret it. And I, you know, I had enjoyed doing it. And it's not that I regret it. It's just how it's just interesting to me more, I would say.
Yeah.
How understood it is that this is the way of the world.
I'm sure you got a lot of attention from it.
Oh, my father.
Tell us about that.
Okay, so my father, ultra conservative from Mobile, Alabama, and his wife said, when your hands ran across Buck Henry's neck, he said, your father just shriveled. And I was like, yeah.
That's really fascinating that this was your first experience with the show. I mean, especially at your age, I assume you didn't have a lot of experience dramatically or acting, and for you to go in and improv with the great Buck Henry before you even step into 8H, that's really fascinating. But do you have any specific memories of the week beginning when you got to 8H? With the rehearsals, did you spend the 12 to 14-hour days with the cast and the writers? And anything that sticks out from the first few days that you were in studio?
Yeah. I will say I had done some plays in high school, and I did end up studying theater in college, but they just made you feel comfortable. And Buck Henry's, like I said, he's such a skilled person. But, oh my God, yes, so many memories. Because like you all, I was a super fan. And we spent every day there. We didn't do the 12 hours, but we did. We spent every day there. When they brought us into the studio, and we even got to sit in on some of the meetings with the writers. And that to me was one of the most exciting things, was to see how these writers worked. And so, yeah, I got to watch that cast, which was right after Chevy Chase had left. So it was Bill Murray. I don't know how long he'd been on the show at that point. But yeah, it was Gilda Radner, and I had a crush on Dan Aykroyd. And so I had sent him a fan letter, a year or so before. And he had sent me back a picture of him on a motorcycle and wrote, "Oh, Connie, let's ride to Nicaragua together this summer." And, I was like, oh, unfortunately I lost that, but that signature thing. But anyway, but the person who really impressed me was John Belushi. I mean, they were all lovely.
I want to make sure, Connie, that you, as you go into Belushi here, you had shared with me previously in rehearsals or whatnot, the Samurai.
Yeah. So, I will say one of the things that was so surprising to me was how that studio was just a big open studio with these little tiny sets, and how the whole crew and how they changed sets and costumes, and the whole crew was amazing, and the costumers, and but you were asking about John Belushi.
Yeah, I just remember you sharing with me in a previous conversation, just witnessing the brilliance of him in that samurai character, I think in rehearsals or whatever, right?
I mean, I think they were all brilliant. He was, but yeah, so he was very nice to me, right? There was one time we were hanging out on one of the sets that they weren't using while people were rehearsing, and he had a beer, and he gave me a beer, and we're hanging out. He's lounging on the sofa of one of these sets, and and he was complaining about, I hate this, and I said, well, why do you do it? And he goes, because I love doing the show. And so anyway, so he was fun. And so what happened was, during one of the, it was close to the day of the show. I think there's garbage trucks coming. And so my dog, hang on just a sec. Bucky.
Did you say your dog's name is Bucky?
No.
Okay.
Hawkins.
Oh, okay, Hawkins.
Okay. Good boy. All right. So
I thought we were about to uncover something there.
Yeah, no. Actually, Buck Henry was very nice, but very more professional. He didn't, like other people, like Gilda Radner was very, oh, this is so exciting for you. And, and then, and everybody was nice, but so John Belushi, it was probably the day before the day of the show. And so they were rehearsing Samurai Psychiatrist. And I think they were even in costume. I don't know if they were in costume. Maybe not. But anyway, so they're on one of these little tiny sets. So Samurai Psychiatrist, John Belushi is the samurai psychiatrist, and Buck Henry is the patient. And, hopefully people have seen some of these scenes, but he does this crazy Akira Kurosawa-based actions with swords, and he, tears up the set in these scenes, and it's quite brilliant and very physical. And of course he does, slaughters the Japanese language because he's just making sounds, which today wouldn't fly. His physicality and the passion, it's very much like Kurosawa. I mean, I'm a huge Kurosawa fan. And that's kind of typical Belushi, to take a resource like that, which he would have just seen like on TV at a glance or in a movie theater. It's not like today. It's not easy to access it, and then use that as inspiration. So he's doing his samurai freak out, and he just started improvising. And he just went. I mean, he went on and on and on, just yelling and screaming and jumping around and waving the sword. And Buck Henry, of course, just was that stoic, like right with him the whole time. And I swear to God, this probably went on for 20 minutes.
Wow.
And these people who work set and crew and lighting and producing, they're bored with actors or annoyed with actors.
They've seen it all, kind of, yeah.
They're off doing their own thing. Well, by the time it was over, every single person in that whole Studio 8H had gathered around this tiny little set where, it was deep with people just to watch him go. And he just went. It was incredible. And I now teach acting and directing at Brown, and I often talk. I mean, I don't mention this too much to my students because of the LSD part, but but that idea of, first of all, an actor like him taking inspiration from somebody like Kurosawa and then just improvising to such a great extent that all these people who are hardened to really gifted comedians just stop what they're doing. And he could have gone on forever. And Buck Henry just right with him, just that straight man thing, right with him. And it was remarkable.
They're really perfect scene partners. I've often felt that the best versions of those samurai sketches are the ones with Buck in them. So totally agree with everything you're saying. So I would love to ask you a little bit about some of the other segments that happened throughout the November 1977 episode. And basically we have, in addition to the Gary Weiss film, there's like 4 other sections of the show where you're appearing in sketches. One is our cold opening where you're coming out into the locker area. Then there's the monologue with Buck asking each of you questions. You also do Weekend Update with Lorraine Newman where she's going through all of you. And then again at the Good Nights. Were those, were a lot of those improvised, or do you remember if they were written by writers at the show and then you were reading off cue cards? How did that work?
They were all improvised, but they were rehearsed. Okay. So, I truly don't even remember because I've never seen it, the episode, nor do I want to, because I want to just remember it, as the fun it was.
For what it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's funny because you're saying things and I'm like, oh, I don't remember that. And, but yeah, so they were improvised, but then I think that's why they had us in the writers' meeting, was they then guided us as to what to say. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it was controlled.
Do you remember if there were specific writers that were responsible for those segments? Like anyone that you worked with?
I don't remember that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember that, but I remember being in the writers' room, and I think they also, I forget who the director was.
Davey Wilson.
He or maybe an assistant probably was, if I recall correctly, they were right there when the first times we did it and guided us right there. So, but they wouldn't have had us in the writers' room, I think, if they didn't want to have writers have some kind of input.
Yeah, sort of organically kind of do the through line. No, it all makes sense. And of course, we're asking these questions, of course, because we're very interested, but yeah, how unfair it is, because it wasn't a week ago, it wasn't a few months ago, it was we're talking about 1977. But and I look, I think it's incredible for you to kind of have that decision to go, you know what, I just want to remember it for the time it was, and I don't need to go back and watch it. If anything, though, Connie, I don't know if you know this, I know we talked about it the previous time, but you are one of the, you got to say live from New York at Saturday night, and the camera zooms in on you because you are the person who's in the center. So that is just an incredible moment, an incredible shot. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the only reason I know that is all my friends told me that afterwards. And it's a good thing, because if I'd known it, I probably would have been nervous, because I
Right.
was so nervous. And so between the dress rehearsal, which was in front of an audience, and the actual show, I mean, I was a mess. And John Belushi pulled me aside. And this is why I will, for all of his trouble, and if he was hitting on me or what, I don't know. I don't really care, because it never felt creepy. And, women have a good sense for that. But he pulled me aside between the shows, and he said to me, he said, "You're going to be fine." He said, "Just relax and just pretend that you're doing this for your friends at school." And just that, I was like, it's a party, And he didn't have to do that. None of the others had to do that. And I had told Dan Aykroyd that I had a crush on him, and he didn't do that. So, but yeah. So because it was just fun, and and the music is live, so you're kind of dancing around between, and they just shuttled us, from. I didn't have to do anything. But I will say it was very special. I'm very glad that I got to be in the studio watching Gilda Radner, because she was so remarkable, and just such a lively person, and so sparkly and fun. And
well, you can tell. I mean, it comes off the screen. I mean, I've watched it again recently, where the very beginning, there's absolute a level of her sincerity and being genuine when she's excited to tell Garrett about you guys being there and everything, and so it's just incredible to hear you talk, to be their witness to it all, and to sort of describe it.
Yeah, and because, like I said, she came up to it. She was always like, "Oh, I'm so excited for you," and it felt sincere. And I remember about her, she always carried around this huge bag full of clothes, and she was just always changing her clothes. And she was just kind of like a squirrel with her energy, And then Lorraine Newman was so cool, because she had her friends were punk.
Yeah.
And so Lorraine Newman was like, "Hey," and we were all like, "Oh, she's really cool," But the truth is, I hung out with the governor the most, because he and I just really bonded. And so when they dressed us up as bees there's not a bee episode in that, right?
There's not
I don't think so.
No.
It was cut.
It was cut. Yeah, I showed James. I do have the show list.
So this is the original rundown?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's lovely, and it did make me think of one thing. And Bill would be the guy to correct me if I'm wrong, but so many great things about that episode. And as looking at the rundown and seeing the little chocolate donuts, though we've seen it several times and it reran, this was the first appearance of it, I think, in that commercial parody on this episode.
That's correct. Yes.
The little chocolate donuts Belushi commercial parody. All of the Olympics and all the celebrities with the, Wheaties kind of feel to it.
I see. Yeah, parody commercial chocolate donuts. Yeah. Yeah, that was the thing. James, I told you this, that was the thing about, when I discovered Saturday Night Live, I was watching TV, obviously, late at night, obviously, and I definitely was stoned, and sorry.
No, I love how you're painting the picture truthfully. Yes, go on.
And
it's legal now.
It's legal now, that's right. And I was watching the TV, and there was an ad, and it was Chevy Chase. I think he was a psychiatrist or something, and it was an ad. But, I didn't know who Chevy Chase, I'd never seen Chevy Chase. And I saw this ad, and I thought, oh, this is the weirdest thing. What the hell? How could this be on TV, right? And it was a moment of really I thought it was for real at first. And then I gradually realized it wasn't. And then Mr. Bill popped up, and I was like, okay, this is a place of glory. This is funny and smart and radical, very political. And so all those commercial parodies, they caught me the first time. I thought it was for real.
Well, you're not the only one, and I just have to say, it's it's easy to forget, or it's to be lost on some of us, and they don't do the commercial parodies as much as they did back in the day, but it was pretty common. I remember the stories of Lorne throwing fits because some affiliates would cut thinking that was an actual ad, and so they but that was it's just so creative, and just just to think about and to hear your perspective in terms of just the time of the show is really cool.
Well, it was also, they were talking about TV, those writers. They were talking about the medium that they were on, and in a way that was really different and they weren't afraid to get into some stuff.
I'm interested. You mentioned the governor a couple of times. What did you think of your other co-finalists, and where did you feel? What was your gut feeling after the show? Did you think you had a good chance, or did you think Miskel was just?
Yeah, there was no way you were going to beat her. First of all, she was lovely, and I mean, what a sport for her. Because how old was she?
80, I think.
She was 80. Yes.
Yeah. And she flew in from Louisiana, I think.
First time on a plane, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah. And she was a sweetheart, so there was I knew. I mean, of course I hoped, but I knew. And she was just as sweet and as lovely as could be, and just a great sense of humor. And the mother from Peoria, she was nice. She was fine. I don't remember much about her. The guy from Oregon was a little...
David Lewis.
Yeah.
Dropout, unemployed kid from Oregon. He was, Bill, he was a little strange, wasn't he?
Yeah, he had the most awkward moment of the night with his turkey gobble in the monologue. So
he was odd, I have to say, and I thought he was the one I didn't trust. Just immediately, you know what I mean? And
he came in 5th place.
All right, right on. I didn't know that.
No,
I don't want to know what my ranking was.
I was going to say, Jim, how do you know that? Yeah,
I'm just guessing. But Connie, that's funny because so Miskel Spillman, who won the contest, and we'll find out 2 episodes later that she will win it. She is one of only 2 people ever to host SNL, having been born in the 1800s. So just Yeah, it's incredible to think about something like that. But I'm so glad to hear that she was as lovely as she came across on television.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I mean, because, that show was radical. And here she comes from the Deep South, and just funny and smart and willing, and the governor too. I mean, his team sent the email, the postcard in for him, and he just had the best. He had the best attitude. He was so much fun. I mean, really fun. So
you could tell he was enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah. And didn't take it seriously, didn't take himself seriously in it. And he, like nowadays people go on it, politicians, to get some whatever voters or something. He was just there because it was a lark. And he was kind of an adventurer. And so Newsweek, which at that time was a big national famous magazine, and those kind of Time and Newsweek were very important back in the day. And so they dressed us up in the bee costumes. And so I think there's a picture of the governor and I in our bee costumes in Newsweek somewhere. I don't have it, but
that's the other side thing of that week. Not only did Newsweek do the photo opportunity for you guys, but a magazine called Viva Magazine was doing a behind the scenes of SNL, and you guys are featured in that as well. So a lot of publicity for this week for you.
Well, I mean, what they were doing was so risky.
Yeah, 20 years before reality television, right? I mean,
and pulling people in and doing it live.
For sure. Connie, are you surprised that they've never done a contest like this again?
No, because it's so risky. And there were so many things that could have gone wrong. And also, I think that the other thing is that the grandmother, it was charming, but it didn't, from my perspective, it didn't really work for the whole show. I mean, it was nice. It was a Christmas show and everything, but sort of the payoff, where was the payoff?
Yeah.
I think the fun was more in the contest and the 5 finalists and people voting, but it didn't, she wasn't very funny on the show, but charming, of course. And,
well, and speaking of the risk, I guess, just since you brought that up, obviously the person who went for it and made the risk happen, Lorne, what do you remember in sort of seeing Lorne in that executive producer role during the time?
Yeah, I mean, he was very curt, and very gracious, very like talking to us and telling us, but, obviously very busy. And I remember in the writer's room, very stressed out. And, but, he paid attention to us. He was polite, but didn't waste any time or words on us. I think all of them, and the writers, as well as everybody who worked on that show, they were willing to take risks.
Yeah.
And the network obviously let them. I just don't think that can happen so much now. Maybe, social media and more people creating their own stuff. But for a network like NBC to put that on.
Right. I mean, I would love to see it personally, but I understand that there are a lot of risks involved. I just think it'd be fun for us to get to cover something like that.
And you could host it, Connie. Like, that would be the perfect circle of life.
I'd come in dressed like Barbarella and just take them all, hostage and demand my place in the sun.
Yes.
Yeah. Or even being the Buck Henry role of taking, you know what I mean?
But I think you need a core, somebody like Buck Henry, who's so stable to kind of be a central focus for that kind, because the chaos is in the people you're bringing in.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to, there's a little note that one of my Vassar friends, she wrote it on Vassar stationery here. And I guess she worked for the Office of Career Planning. Oh, no, I guess she was the director. So her name is Mary Bodell. Wait, let me see if I can. Sorry, I'm not good at this.
No, we got it. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Do you want me to try and read it out for you?
No, I'll read it out. She just said, I'm sorry, how sorry I am that we won't be seeing you live this Saturday night. I also want to tell you how much I admire you for the good sportsmanship you have shown throughout this whole time, both the winning and the waiting. You have brought a lot of people a lot of pleasure and excitement, and have made the past month or so more fun for all of us at Vassar. So a great thank you and a Merry Christmas to you. Now, I thought Mary Bodell was somebody in my dorm. Maybe her daughter was. But anyway, it's just what the reason I wanted to read that was it brought a lot of pleasure and excitement to everybody at Vassar. It was a big deal to the community and to me, obviously, but it was fun.
So, kind of building on that, did you remain a fan of SNL going forward? Are you still a fan?
I fell away. I definitely remained a fan. I think when Belushi left and Aykroyd left, there's the garbage truck. No hockey. I think it's when when a lot of those Harvard Lampoon writers left. Like Michael O'Donoghue for me was a big deal. And I think when they left and it just kind of lost some of its political edge, I just wasn't as interested. And then I don't watch it anymore. It's a little slick. But it depends who's on. You know, there's some performers that I just think are amazing. The woman who did Bridesmaids.
Oh, Kristen Wiig.
Kristen
Wiig.
Yeah, like there. Every so often, there's these comedians who are also great actors, like John Belushi. Like John Belushi could have been a great actor, given the right parts. And I think Kristen Wiig is one of those. And it's in her characters. You can see it. She just gets into them in such an amazing way. So I'll watch Kristen Wiig, but the whole show, it's a little too slick for me. And the writing is not as political. Mm-hmm. Or they just weren't so, like you would never see a Gary Weiss film, one of those black and white things. Or at least I don't know. I mean,
yeah. Well, everybody has their era for sure, so it makes sense that yours was, as most people would familiarize with, was when you were with your friends out in college, and that makes sense.
But let me just say, there was one other thing. When Eddie Murphy was on, again, he's one of those comedians who's a great actor. So his thing about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is just stunning, and a lot of the stuff he did, I just thought was remarkable.
Truly. So yeah, I have a couple things I've always wanted to ask you. So number one is, did you go to an SNL after party after the show that you were there? And what was that like?
Well, it was so much fun because every famous person in New York was there. And, what's his name? The fellow from Monty Python.
Eric Idle?
Eric Idle. So you walk in, Paul Simon was a big part of Saturday Night Live, but there's Paul Simon and Eric Idle and, Monty Python
huge.
In the room. It was crazy and it was super fun. It was mostly sitting around. There wasn't a lot of dancing, which I thought was fun. But so that was really fun. Oh, and I did get some signatures in my book because they gave us a book. I think I sent you a picture of that.
Yeah, the script book, the green book from from that era. Yeah.
And so I ran around like a little nerd and was asking people for their, and Paul Simon was, he was so annoyed with me.
Oh, God.
And of course, John Belushi didn't go to that party. And
he was at the after party.
Yeah. And he had asked me to go to the after party. And, you know, it was one of the few moments of sanity I've ever had to say no, you know, because normally I would have been up for parties, but I'm always glad I didn't do that. I was like, yeah, because, you know, that could have gotten weird. But I will tell you, there was one moment that I thought was really funny, which was, I want to say we were still in our bee costumes, but probably not. Anyway, we're sitting around the set, and John Belushi comes up to the governor and me, and there was another person there. Oh, he was the reporter, the journalist from Newsweek. And John Belushi says, hey, come on, let's go to my dressing room. For the three of us. So we're all like, yeah, sure, let's go. So we go through the little hallways, and and he gets to his dressing room, and he's got the wrong key. And so he said, so he's going to go get his other key. And just at that moment, Barbara Burns comes tearing around the corner, and it's just wildly looking for us. And she's like, no. She says, no,
don't go in there.
Don't go in. And she pulled us away. And I was like, afterwards, I said, oh, yeah, you've got the governor of South Dakota, an 18-year-old girl, and a journalist from Newsweek going into John Belushi's dressing room. What could go wrong?
Everyone needs a Barbara Burns.
Yeah, that was disaster avoided. But
the look on her face was so funny. But anyway, yeah. So I did go to the after party, but not the after party.
Okay. And then my other question for you was, and I'm sure this is something, or I believe this is something that you would have thought of over the years, but had you won the contest, have you thought of what your episode of SNL would have looked like if you had hosted the show?
You know, I never did think about that. No. I think there was a part of me, I think, that was relieved in a way. But I also thought those writers were so brilliant that basically just put me in anything and tell me what to do. I mean, I was in such admiration for all of them. I mean, and again, I have to say the costume people and all the people, everybody working on the show were remarkable, and how hard they worked. So no, I never thought about that.
It would have been really interesting just to, like, in an alternate universe, what each of your episodes would have looked like, because I think it would have been fun. I think you had a good vibe going on with the audience, like being.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely think I would have been great, because, you know, and in my life I ended up doing comedy improv, you know, and I'm good at it. But yeah, I mean, the only thing is, I think we avoided just making lots of jokes about co-ed Vassar people, because Vassar used to be all women, and it had only been co-ed for like 15 years. So, but I don't know. I mean, I never thought about that.
So you studied, I did read that you studied at Groundlings, is that correct?
Yeah.
And that's fascinating. I mean, along with 8H, it's one of those cathedrals. Like, I got to go there for the first time last summer, and it's like Wrigley Field or Dodger Stadium as far as, you know, you can feel the history in this place. How much time did you spend there, and who were some of the other people in your company? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. I mean, we were Groundlings East, so we were in New York. Okay. We weren't in the LA. And like, I know one of my classmates went on to do a lot of television. And one of my classmates was married to Michael, you know, SNL. God, sorry, my brain. Mike Myers.
Mike Myers.
No.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Robin Roseanne. who was brilliant. And that's her mother is what my Coffee Talk is based
Coffee
on.
Talk, Linda Richmond, yeah.
And Robin was brilliant. And so I had a lot of fun. And, we put together our little show and we played around New York for a couple of years. But we didn't have any of those big heavy hitters. It wasn't like the LA scene where they put us in a troupe and then you performed and then people got plucked out to go audition. So it wasn't quite that pipeline, but it was great. It was really fun. But yeah, the Groundlings, all those great, but not just the Groundlings. We talk about Second City.
Tons of history, tons of just amazing talent who've gone through the ranks there. So we talked about your episode and the five of you, and at the very end of that episode, you're paraded back there on the stage for the good nights one last time to vote. You're all given letters, right? Your letter B, and you all have those sweaters, and I believe you have located and still have. Oh my gosh, here it is, ladies and gentlemen, the sweater with the letter B.
Let me make that big for everybody, Connie. So
let me get it on. I think it might show better.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So here, let me see. Where is the letter? Letter.
Unbelievable.
No, it's a little small.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so we all had these sweaters, and then people would vote. They'd send in your letter. Oh yeah, it's a little small, I have to say.
I love that you have kept that you have these other amazing mementos from that time and from your experience there as a teacher, directing and teaching acting there in Brown. You probably don't too often have you're probably not bringing out the sweater too often for your kids, so I'm glad you did for us.
No, and as I said, I don't usually mention it because of the drug reference,
right?
But I will want to. I do want. There's one other thing I wanted to say. Oh, and I did save this from the set, which was they put this around their things of beer.
Oh my God!
I guess to hide the brand, and I don't know why I kept it, but I did.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and but so after one of the nights, the governor and me, and I think maybe the mother of three, we went out on the town in New York, and we went to Jimmy Ryan's Dixieland and saw the great trumpet player Roy Eldridge. And that was really something. That was, we just wandered in, and, I'm 18, I'm hanging out with the governor of South Dakota. I'm doing Saturday Night Live. We stumble into this club, jazz club, and there's Roy Eldridge, who I had never heard of, but was a great jazz trumpet player. And that was a really fun
Just
moment.
an amazing New York night. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Connie, I mean, you have had an experience that millions of people in the last 45 years wish they could have had. So I'm so grateful that you're able to share some of that with us today, because I'm sure that our listeners are going to be so thankful to get to hear all the ins and outs of those details. Anything else you want to tell our audience?
No, I mean, it's an institution, isn't it? And it's amazing it's gone on this long. And I just really want to pay tribute to all the great artists before the camera and behind the camera who keep this show going and keep it fresh. And, it's brought a lot of joy to a lot of people, myself included.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time today. So appreciated and wonderful to get to hear from you. James, thank you for joining us as well. So great to get to hear from you. Anything else you would like to plug?
Not to plug, just to just to clearly and most respectfully say thank you to Connie, because just thankful that I found you, and I don't know what kind of person that says about me that I did my due
Connie,
diligence.
James is our SNL bounty hunter. We send him out there and he brings people back in. Yeah.
Well, and I do want to say that at first I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. Who are these people? And what do they want? And this could be weird. And why the hell are they interested in this? And I was very skeptical. And James, you just kept being polite, and you kept, letting me know that you weren't creepy. Maybe you are, but you didn't seem creepy.
Just the right amount of creepiness is what I like to say. But and I think it's okay to say here, because I found it just is an interesting tidbit. There was one episode in particular that I shared with you that you listened to that I think was the turning point where you said, okay, right?
Yeah. Oh, it was John Belushi's wife. Yeah.
Yep. Judy, the Judy interview.
Yeah. Just because, all the stuff that woman went through and how much they loved each other. And, he was such an important artist who got so in trouble, like so many people and so many artists. And so I thought, well, that's a good, if she's talking to them.
Yeah. Well, thank you for trusting us, and yeah, I'll definitely recommend that episode to our listeners too. I'll link it here, so in case you wanted to go back and check that one out as well. Bill Kenney, I know you are an SNL historian yourself, so this must have been very cool for you. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, John. Thank you, Connie, for your unique perspective. One of only 5 people in the world who can talk about your experience with that. So you can follow me at BKLove73 on all the socials.
Awesome. Well, you can follow us at the SNL Network on any of the social platforms to see everything we're doing. If you missed what we put out last week, you missed a really fun interview with current SNL cast member Heidi Gardner. We got to talk to her for a little bit. That was so much fun. We recently spoke to Aristotle Atari as well from season 47. So a lot of really fun interviews that we're doing over the summer. We wrapped up our season 48 content, and we have some great summer content coming for you as well, including some superfan takeovers. Bill Kenney will be back with me for that one. So lots of fun stuff here over the summer. Hope you stay with us and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. All right. On behalf of James, Bill, and Connie Crawford from the Anyone Can Host competition, we will see you next time, everybody. Have a good one.